On the 20th of December, 1970, hundreds of people were attending a Christmas party at the Pioneer Hotel in Tucson, Arizona. While guests dined and danced, residents slept peacefully in the rooms above, until just after midnight, when a fire began on the 4th floor of the hotel, a fire that would go on to become the deadliest in Arizona's history. Built in 1929, the Pioneer Hotel was one of Tucson's first high-rise buildings. Upon its opening, the hotel's promotional material claimed that the hotel was absolutely fireproof. It was equipped with standpipe connections on each floor of the hotel, 2 external fire escapes, and a smoke tower which was designed to provide firefighters easy access to the upper floors in the event of a fire. While these fire safety measures were commendable for the time when the hotel was built, the building would not be considered fireproof by modern standards. There was, for example, no sprinkler system, no centralized alarm, and an abundance of flammable materials such as wood and fabric used in the finish of the hotel. This finish, which included a great deal of plush carpet and wooden furniture, was only fitting for a hotel as glamorous as the Pioneer. It was built by businessman Albert Steinfeld and his son, Harold Steinfeld, who later took over sole ownership of the hotel after his father's death in 1935. Even after selling the hotel in 1963, Harold and his wife continued to live permanently in its penthouse. As well as being a popular place to stay, the hotel was also known for its lively banquets, dances, and conventions. It was the obvious choice for tourists visiting the city, as well as for locals looking to organize a high-profile event. Visiting celebrities often stayed at the Pioneer, and it was a particular favorite of well-to-do families from the Mexican state of Sonora, for whom it was more or less tradition to stay at the Pioneer when visiting Tucson. The hotel was, indeed, such a part of the fabric of the town that it was commonly said that, if you grew up in Tucson, you grew up at the Pioneer Hotel. On the night of the 20th of December 1970, the hotel was host to more than 700 guests. In addition to those staying on a temporary or permanent basis in the hotel's many rooms, there was also a large event taking place that night. Hughes Aircraft, now known as Raytheon, was holding its annual Christmas party in the hotel's ballroom, with around 350 people in attendance. Just after midnight, the fire started in 2 different places on the 4th floor of the hotel. It had plenty of fuel at its disposal, including flammable carpeting, wooden furniture, wallpaper, and Christmas decorations. Feeding on this abundant material, it quickly spread from the 4th floor all the way up to the 11th, aided by open stairwells that acted like chimneys. Guests at the Hughes Aircraft party, as well as those who were resident on the lower floors, flooded from the hotel through any available exit. Some staff lingered to try and extinguish the flames, before quickly realizing that the blaze was out of control. Within just minutes, the fire was firmly established. Hundreds of guests were trapped on the upper floors of the building, separated from safety by a solid barrier of smoke and flames. At 12:19 a.m., the city's emergency dispatchers received 3 separate calls reporting a fire at the Pioneer Hotel. Many firefighters initially assumed that these were simply a bout of prank calls, and only realized that the situation was real when they saw an orange glow on the city's skyline. Within minutes, 3 fire engines and 2 ladder trucks were on scene. Upon arrival, they immediately called for all available backup. Another 8 engines and over 200 firemen flocked to the hotel to help. The available ladders were approximately 30 meters or 100 feet long, meaning that they could only access the first 8 stories of the 11-story building. Guests who were trapped on those 3 inaccessible floors were left in a dire situation. Some attempted to escape by knotting together bedsheets and clambering down the outside of the building until they were low enough to be rescued by ladder. A desperate tactic that, nonetheless, did allow at least some guests to escape with their lives. 6 guests were able to shimmy down a copper pipe on the side of the building until they were low enough to be rescued by ladder. Others were not so fortunate. There are reports of guests jumping from their windows. In some cases, they threw out mattresses first in an attempt to soften their landing. In other cases, it is possible that they knew they would not survive, but had no other way to escape the all-consuming flames. After rescuing many people from the exterior of the building, firefighters pumped water through the 7th and 8th floor windows, then entered the building and began to battle the fire from inside. It was a complicated operation, made more so by the fact that the hotel did not have signs in the stairwells indicating which floor was which. Firefighters were often uncertain exactly where they were in the building at any given time. Furthermore, there were only a small number of radios available. With firefighters spread throughout the building, communication became difficult. To help answer the constant calls for more resources, caches of firefighting and rescue equipment were established within the burning building. The fire was eventually brought under control by 1:16 a.m., less than an hour after emergency services had arrived on scene. A systematic search of the building ensued, during which it was established that 28 people had perished in the fire. The one-time owner of the building, Harold Steinfeld, and his wife were included in this number. One further person would die later in hospital, bringing the total death toll to 29, the single biggest loss of life in a building fire in the entire history of Tucson. An investigation followed, and it was quickly established that the fire had been started simultaneously in 2 separate locations on the 4th floor, leading investigators to conclude that it had been a deliberate arson. Soon after, Tucson police arrested Louis Taylor, a 16-year-old of mixed black and Mexican descent, who had been at the hotel that night. Tucson police accused him of starting the fire so that he could use the diversion to steal possessions from the hotel rooms, which Taylor denied. He admitted that he had instead been quietly gatecrashing the Hughes Aircraft Christmas party to try and score some free drinks. When the fire began, Taylor had been seen by several people assisting with the evacuation and putting his own life at risk in an unsuccessful attempt to extinguish the flames. Despite this, Taylor was convicted of starting the fire. He was ultimately given 28 life sentences and remained in prison for decades despite constantly maintaining his innocence. Many people were sympathetic to Taylor, noting that some evidence against him had been admitted unlawfully, that the evidence that the cause of the fire was arson was flimsy, and that the police had made no efforts to investigate other suspects once Taylor had been arrested. Finally, in 2012, the Arizona Justice Project asked the court to dismiss Taylor's case. They claimed that it would not be possible to determine that the fire was arson using modern forensic methods, and that Taylor had been treated unfairly. His arrest had come at a time when racial and class tension in Tucson were high, and this had contributed to his conviction despite very little legally admissible evidence of guilt. Finally, in 2013, Taylor was released after agreeing to a no-contest plea. In the years which followed the fire, many changes were made to fire safety regulations in Arizona. At the insistence of the Tucson Fire Department, Tucson adopted a standardized fire code in 1975. The code required all buildings over a certain height to have sprinklers and smoke alarms, smoke-proof stairwells, panic doors, and non-flammable carpet, wallpaper, and furniture. These new standards were applied to high-rises across the city, including the Pioneer Hotel. The fire and smoke damage were repaired, and the entire building was refurbished. For a few more years it operated as a hotel, but with the fire still fresh in the minds of local residents, it was no longer the desirable destination it once was. In 1975 it was sold and converted into an office building. It remains in place to this day. The Tucson Fire Department itself also underwent numerous changes. In the wake of the fire, their budget was significantly increased, allowing them to acquire new equipment and new staff, and to provide emergency medical training for firefighters. As a direct result of the fire, the Tucson Fire Department became stronger, better equipped, and more ready to face disasters that might take place in the future. In the words of the Tucson Fire Department chief, many of the practices in place today within the Tucson Fire Department are directly related to this event, helping make Tucson a safer community in which to live, work, and play for all.